You know what? I'm not even going to make excuses. We're doing Lizzie Borden Part 4 today on Big Pretty Man. Hi, and welcome back to Big Pretty Man, channel for the extra large man who wants to live his life large and in charge. I'm your host, Timothy Big Pretty Crowe. I'm a wardrobe and lifestyle consultant for the extra large man. And like I said in the intro, guys, I'm not even going to make apologies about it. I am doing a Lizzie Borden for the 4th time. And each time I'd done it in the last 3 videos, I had said, oh, that's it for Lizzie Borden. I'm not doing Lizzie Borden anymore. Well, apparently not. And I'm not saying that anymore. And the reason being is that of all the videos I've made, these Lizzie Borden videos have gotten the most response, the most comments, the most questions, and it just seems to keep going on and on. A lot of, as I've said in my last video, a lot of these comments are based on myth. They're based on things seen in not very well researched documentaries, and there are a lot of those out there now. Based on internet theories and theories from people who've written books, of speculation on the case. And also, this has revealed one thing to me, and that is that there is so much rumor, and there is so much legend, and so much urban legend about this case, and the details of the people, and the characters, and the situation of this case, that it's all this is blended together with some not very well made documentaries and films. That it's got, most people don't know the myth from the reality, and that even gets into a lot of the investigators in the case. So it's actually made me reopen my files, look over the case again, look at the transcripts from the court transcripts, look at some of the more recent books that have been written, and I've actually found some details that, because of these questions, I'd overlooked, and I wanted to go in some of that. So I'll no longer say this is my last Lizzie Borden video, because this is such a rich topic, and I could probably do an entire channel just on Lizzie Borden alone. But I will do it here and just keep going as it comes up. So this is just another one in the series. This is number 4 in the series on Lizzie Borden. And this time I wanted to cover a couple of theories that have come up that I want to actually dispel. And the other one, there is actually one that I find very intriguing. I also want to go over some of the, as I said, the myths that are about the Borden case that have become so popular. A lot of people think they're a fact. And I'm even guilty of that. And I want to go over one of those that I just recently found out I've been wrong about the whole time. And also, I've had a lot of people ask me, well, you talk about the timeline and how it eliminates someone coming in the house, and how it eliminates a burglar, and how it eliminates an angry employee, or business partner, and how it eliminates a lot of the people that are around the house, like Uncle Morris and Bridget the maid, and Emma. So exactly how do you think this happened? What do you think was her motives, and what do you think caused her to do it that day, and why did she do it the way she did? And I thought that I would actually lay out my theory or my speculation on what I think was in her mind at the time, her mentality, and how I think that she went about it that day. So let's get started on some of that. Now, first off, I wanted to dispel some theories which I find a little bit ridiculous about the Lizzie Borden case, and even revisiting a few that I covered before with some new information. The first one I'm going to go over is the whole thing about the bodies being moved. Now, I covered this in my Lizzie Borden number 2 video, the revisit video, talking about, that there was this theory that's become very popular, and even people claiming that there was facts to back this up, that the bodies had been moved and then replaced. And I'd said then that I'd found no real evidence for that, and that really, considering the crime, whether they've been moved or replaced, really it didn't affect my theory as to how I think it was done, nor does it affect the way in which they were killed. Both Mr. and Mrs. Borden. However, I don't, when something like this comes up, I'm the type that I don't take anyone's word for anything. Something that happens way too often on the internet. There's a difference between scholarship and looking some information up among the common populace in today's age as there was back in earlier times. Because you go back before social media, if you wanted to look something up, you went to an encyclopedia. And encyclopedias were much more reliable because each one of those subjects in an encyclopedia was written by an expert. And then that entry was actually examined by at least 3 to 4 other experts in that particular field, and rewrites were done until they all agreed. That's pretty scholarly, and that's pretty solid, at least for the known knowledge at the time. You don't have that today. Anybody with a computer and a keyboard, no matter their education, no matter their sources, they, or their inspirations, they can just put out anything they want without references. The one thing that the internet is missing, all this information, none of this information or very little has reference. So anybody can say anything, and that's where we're getting the alternative facts. Well, facts are facts. There's no such thing as an alternative fact. A fact is a fact. If it's not a fact, if something else is a fact, then it's not a fact. But that's the world we live in. A lot of information and so much unverified and misinformation, and that definitely applies here with the Borden case. There was already a lot of crazy theories out there about Lizzie Borden and about the Borden murders and the whodunit that went to the extreme, but the internet has just made that even a bigger mess, and people don't know what to think at this point. So however, where I was a professor, I do know how to do research and how to look for references. And there's a couple of these issues like this that I want to examine. Hence back to this, the moved bodies. Now, as I said before, it really doesn't make any difference to what happened if these photos have been tampered with. However, when checking the actual transcripts and the evidence, those bodies likely were not moved. And I have proof for that. It's right in the transcripts. When, they claim that Mr. Borden's body was moved. They picked up and they moved it, and then they put it back. And I even had one person claim that I was wrong about the coach. The cops put it there to prop his head up for the pictures. What was his sources? I don't know. He's a troll, and I actually blocked him. But when I looked into it, there is no proof that they moved the bodies. There's actually proof that they didn't move the bodies. When Dr. Bowen, the first person on the scene, it was the doctor that Lizzie sent Bridget across the street to get, when he came on the scene, he was the first one to see Mr. Borden's body laying there on that couch. And in the transcripts, when he was brought in for the inquest, they actually showed him that very famous photo, which we have right here. And they asked him, said, "Is this correct? Is this the way you found it?" And he said, as you can read here from the transcript, that he described the body and the way it was laying, and he also said about the photo that it looked the same to him. If anything, the body may have been a little lower, like it had sunk down a little bit. And that was it. So this is the crime scene. Right there's the proof. Not only that these are the crime scenes as they were found, but also that coat, and he even said that coat was under his head when he arrived. So that's the end of that. Now, the next theory that I want to dispel, and I spoke of this in my last video, video number 3, Lizzie Borden revisited again, about this theory about Emma Borden. There is a crazy theory out there now, and even a book or two written, that says that Emma did it, and they claim that she had took a horse from Fairhaven, where she was visiting, rode up to back to Fall River, back to the neighborhood, back to the house, and killed her parents, and then rode back. You know, sometimes I think when people come up with some of these theories, they're forgetting that this is reality and not fiction. That this is not Agatha Christie, an Agatha Christie book, or this is not an episode of Death in Paradise, or Monk, or some sort of Sherlock Holmes who did it that can go a little bit into the complicated extreme, and that can even defy logic. Because this theory is, when you just use basic physics and logic, is impossible. And even though I said that in that last video, I'm going to explain exactly why. Okay, and I looked this up. Now, for what we do know first is that Emma had went to visit a family named Brunel that were very close to the Borden family. In fact, there's some relationship, some family ties with the Brunels, and they were very close with both Lizzie and Emma. And Emma had went to visit for a few days, and now they live, as I said, in Fairhaven. Fairhaven is 15 miles from Fall River. Now, today, to travel 15 minutes, of course, is with cars and trains and buses. It's not going to take, 15 miles is not that far. But that's with the modern transportation, not with a horse. So I looked up, how long does it would take a horse to go that 15 miles at a normal pace? And the answer is it take it about 3 hours. 3 hours. Maybe a little less if you trot it and run it. So 2.5 to 3 hours to make that trip one way. So now let's look at that. So for Emma to have done this, she would have had to get up very early in the morning. Something like, like 4 o'clock in the morning. And she would have had to have rode 3 hours to Fall River from Fairhaven. Not missed by her host. And then once she got there, then we know the murders were between 9:30 and 11 o'clock in the morning. So then that would have meant another 3 hours back. So you're talking about an 8-hour trip by which she was staying with friends, and these friends that were hosting her did not miss her, did not notice that she was gone. This would have taken her half the day. If she left at 11 o'clock, she wouldn't have been back till like 1 or 2. So she was missing from like 4 in the morning to around 2 in the afternoon. Nobody noticed this. And not only that, but also consider that she was not traveling through some isolated place. She's right in the middle of a very highly populated and industrious area of Massachusetts. So what they're trying to say here is that she took this 3-hour horse ride right through the center of Fall River, right at the time when everyone's going to work and the town's bustling up. It was a Thursday. To the house in the middle of the neighborhood. Nobody saw her on the road. Nobody saw her come through town. Nobody in the neighborhood seen this horse come in. And then she hid in the house for 2 hours, killed her mother, then waited and killed her father, and then got back on this horse, rode the 3 hours back through town, right around noon, between 11 and noon, from 11 up until 2, or so, and nobody saw her. Nobody encountered her. Nobody remembers seeing Emma Borden on this horse and her host did not miss her. We are now in the borders of impossible and ridiculous. It's not even worth talking about. Emma Borden was not there. She was in Fairhaven. There is no way that woman made an 8-hour trip, 6 of which would have been on the road with a horse in the middle of the day in the busy part of Massachusetts between these two very busy towns. It's ridiculous, and it's not reflecting reality. Emma's completely innocent. I don't think you could prove anybody was not there any more than that. Well, now that I've named 2 theories, I think we can easily kick out one of which the evidence itself shows it and statement shows is not true, and the other one is just flat ridiculous. I'd like to mention one that I think is very intriguing and I think may actually be quite true. And that is, it's always been said, it's even in the rhyme, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. But it's always, we say an axe, which are actually, in truth, a hatchet. And usually when we think of this murder, we think of a hatchet killer. However, and it's kind of even accepted, there was the hatchet was put in evidence, but which was inconclusive. They still have it there in the Historical Society of Fall River. But was it an axe? There's always been something that bothered me about the wounds to the head of both Mrs. Borden and Mr. Borden. They don't seem like they were made with a hatchet. They look like the cuts themselves look like the shape of a hatchet blow, but there just seemed to be something wrong. And there was a gentleman that put out a theory that it was not a hatchet, but was actually one of these old-fashioned irons, clothing irons. One of them old type ones you set up on top of the stove to heat up, an actual piece of iron. And actually looking at the wounds, and and that nagging voice in the back of my head says there's something not right about these wounds. It actually, I think, answers it, because my issue with the wounds was that I'm an old farm boy. I grew up on a farm, and I had to use hatchets to cut wood as well as other things. And a hatchet, just by its design, is made to for the least amount of effort to cut something. That's the reason even children can use a hatchet and chop things up, because the way a hatchet is made, all of the force, with the shape of the handle and the shape of the blade, all of the force, all the energy is concentrated into the wedge. The wedge of that blade. So there's a lot of pressure, a lot of energy and power in, of the swing of the motion in the end of that at the end of that blade. That's the reason, even children can use them to chop up wood. A hammer has the similar dynamics. Even a kid can hammer a nail in with one hand. But to see how well this is constructed and the science behind it, try to drive a nail in with a rock, and you'll see the difference. It's not so easy, because all the inertia is put into the end of the hammer, the focus, and puts all the energy right into it. Same thing with a hatchet; it puts all of the energy and the inertia into that blade, and because of that, when you chop with a hatchet, it should have chopped those heads up, like steak. Their heads should have been sliced apart. 11 blows and 19 blows, their heads should have been sliced up like a sliced up ham. And in fact, when I was a kid, when we would, this is a little grim, but when we would kill a deer, like a doe, we would often cut off the snout to give to the dogs as a reward. Well, I was a little kid, and one whack, it went through it like butter. It just popped it right off. Would have been the same with their heads. Why weren't their heads just absolutely nothing but cut up mush? Instead, and clean cuts all the way through. It should have went all the way through their heads to the ground. Easily. Especially being welded, brought down with all of her weight and in a frenzy on their heads, standing over them. That was been a lot of power. She was a stout little gal. And a child could have done this damage. Why wasn't the damage done when Lizzie did it? Those heads should have been completely destroyed, chopped up. They're not. Instead, they look like the wounds seem rather shallow in most of them, and the heads look more like they're smashed in, almost like someone took a sharp rock and beat them in the head with it, which would have more smashed the skulls in. Mr. Borden's whole side of his skull was smashed in, almost like he was, like I said, like he was beaten with a sharp rock. But yet you could still see the cuts, those shallow. What's that tell me? It was something heavy with a blunt end. And the one thing that's in that house, and the one thing that would have done that, was one of those old-fashioned irons. They do have that sharper edge, and with enough blows that would have left the slash, but it would have been the bludgeoning effect that would have caved the head in. And so I think it's very plausible, and I think even makes more sense that this iron rather than a hatchet was used. Now, I'm not completely sure of this, and there's even a possibility maybe she used both. I think she may have actually used, possibly used a hatchet on the mother, but maybe more of the iron with her father, or vice versa. I think that it's possible. We always just think of the hatchet. It could have been, it could have been the hatchet, or it could have been this iron, and I'm now in favor of the iron on both. And it would also solve another problem. What did she do with the weapon? No one would have been thinking of this iron, or the blood on it. And if she had, we do know she had talked about ironing before, so the stove was hot. She said it wasn't quite hot enough for her to iron handkerchiefs. But if she set that, after she did it, even if she wiped it off, if she'd have set that iron back up on the stove, it would have bubbled and fried any blood completely off of it. And nobody would have been looking for it, so nobody would have saw it. So I think that this theory that it was actually a old-fashioned clothes iron over a hatchet is very interesting and could be very possible. Now, as I said before, there have been a lot of rumors about the Borden case and urban legends that have been said over and over throughout time, plus all these theories that people hear, and they think rather than a theory, they're fact. And when all mixed together with the rumors, the urban legends, all these theories that people think are actual fact, has created quite a mess in the public perspective of the Lizzie Borden case. A lot of people believe that that the girls were molested. Or incest, and that's the reason she killed them. They'll even flat state this as a fact. A lot of people believe that Lizzie Borden was a shoplifter when there is no evidence she was a shoplifter, except for this one incident with some little paintings from a gallery. They claim she shoplifted, but she claims she bought, and the whole thing was dropped. But from that they get she was a shoplifter. Theories about illegitimate children and theories about all that she liked to torture animals, that Lizzie tortured animals, even though she left a significant amount of money for the upkeep of animals when she was known to be a big animal lover. And all of these things are mixed together, and people people believe all these different things. And some of these, and like with the shoplifting theory, or speculation, it's almost accepted as a fact. And a lot of people are unaware of that there are no facts behind this. It's become such a part of the story that it's treated as a fact. And I've always tried to weed all those things out. But you know what? I recently found out that I have been accepted one of these rumors that are stated as fact, when in fact it's not fact. And that would be, and I even said this, I'm actually saying I was wrong about something from my first video, and that is that Andrew Borden was this horrible miser. a lot of that, what I even stated, was incorrect. There's been a book written by an expert who did a lot of research, and she found that this is actually not true. Now, I think that he was rumored to be rather tight on the daughter, and I don't think he was a person that wasted or did things, that were frivolous. He was an older man, about to turn 70, which back then the average life expectancy for a man was about 60, so he was going to be considered an elderly man for his time. And he was also a self-made man. So self-made people are usually very frugal and they don't waste. And also considering his age, like today, a lot of us know older people that don't have cell phones. They say, they don't have a computer. And if they do have a phone, it's it doesn't have, it's not a smartphone. They don't text. They don't get on Facebook. They have no need for all that. Why? Because they went through their whole lives without these things, and they don't have any need for them. And I think that he was the same way. He went through his life with all the modern conveniences that were coming about, and he would have seen no reason to waste money on it. That's just a trait of the practical old, the practical elderly. We all know cases like this. Doesn't mean they're a miser. Just means they're more practical. And they don't see the need to waste on something they never missed. But in truth, looking at his finances, and people can come up with all the rumors they want. A man's bank account tells the tale. Looking at his finances, the man was not miserly. All these rumors about, that they sit in the dark, and I did hear that one, that, at night to save coil, that, he didn't have gas light in the house, he could have electricity, all these things I stated, they're actually not true. We know now that Andrew Borden was actually pretty much on a normal level when it comes to his money. For instance, that house that he moved into was actually a fairly nice house. It was an older home, but he had it renovated. He put in radiator heat rather than stove heat throughout the house, which was expensive, and most people didn't do that. He did that. He actually did put in a water closet, a working toilet in the basement. Most people didn't have that. He also when he renovated the house, he did make sure it had some running water. So that whole thing they only had was not true. They did have a pump, but they also had some running water, which was quite a luxury at the time. Also the man owned a summer house, which still exists. He had a summer home. On his daughters, it's like, his daughters, they were these old maids, and he was so stingy with them. He actually gave them $4 a week. That's equivalent in today's money to about $132. Not a lot of money, but you got to consider, he paid all their bills. They had no expenses. He even made sure that every year they had hand-tailored dresses made. Nice, top-of-the-line hand-tailored dresses. Also, he financed Lizzie Borden's trip to Europe as a gift. This is not the acts of a miserly man. This man, in fact, he's pretty reasonable with his money, and he upkept his daughters and even give them a $132 allowance just for pocket money. Did you get $132 for pocket money from your parents a week? I didn't. So this is not the acts of a miserly man. This is one of these rumors, probably even around at the time, that he was miserly. The man was not a miser. So a lot of people try to use that as an excuse, say, well, he was miserly. And even I'm guilty of this, of saying the man was a miser, and therefore that's the reason, that one of the reasons that Lizzie Borden, out of frustration, murdered him and his wife. But that actually does not hold up. It does not hold up that this man was a miser. And I'm speaking of that, and I talked about this in my last video, there's a lot of people out there that fully believe that Andrew Borden was molesting or having incest with his daughters. Now, number one, as I said before, there is absolutely no evidence for this. And this was not even a theory that came up until like the late 1970s and the 80s, a time when child molestation and child abductions were big in the news. Suddenly they applied it to Lizzie Borden. And a lot of people use this as an excuse, say, well, She kind of like she was justified to kill him because he was molesting her. Well, number one, like I said, there is no evidence that he ever molested his daughters. Zero, nothing. And number two, to make that accusation without any evidence is just another way of demonizing the victim, like they do with rape, like they've done with other types of sexual abuse. They demonize the victim, and I find that very ethically and morally irresponsible. There is no evidence that this murdered man, a man most likely murdered by his own daughter, likely to get his money, is being said, oh well, he had it come because he was molesting his daughters. That is demonizing the victim, and there's no evidence for it, and he does not deserve that any more than women that are raped and they say, well, they were asking for it because of the way they were dressed or because they were drinking or flirting. This is the same thing. There's no evidence this man hurt his daughters, and it is just despicable to me that people say, oh, well, he was probably molesting because she struck him so many times, and therefore he had it coming. That's wrong, and I'll just flat say it. That is sickening to me. And so this man was neither, we know was not a miser, and there is no evidence he ever did anything inappropriate with his daughters. So let's stop that one right here. And finally, here at the end, my cat Raven Kitty, has decided to join me. Hasn't bothered me all day, hasn't been interested in me all day. And of course, the minute I have to do something, here she is. But that's okay. She's more than welcome to stay. I do love my cat. So she's hosting with me. Bear with me. So here at the end, I do want to go over my own speculation based upon the evidence and my own research, as to how and the timeline as to how I think that not only that Lizzie Borden did it, but also why she did it in the bizarre way that it went down. Why she decided to do it that day and in such a risky manner. Now, before I do that, let's say a few words about speculation, especially about historic events and historic speculation. Because when you're studying history, there's a lot of things that just are not documented, and you have to do some speculation. But you're walking a tightrope. It's easy to go off into fantasy and romanticism. I've talked about this with Egyptian stuff, where we tend to want to go off into the fantastic. But one particular thing that I always use is, and I used to tell my college students this, and they do their research, is to stick to what's known as Occam's razor. Now, for those not familiar with Occam's razor, it basically says that the simple version would be the answer. The simplest answer is usually the right one. Now, I use a little more advanced form of it, where it says that the answer with the least amount of components to make it true is most likely the correct answer. And I think that definitely applies here with Lizzie Borden. I apply this to all things. And it's usually about probably 90-95%, accurate, I think. So I apply that here. So so that's the reason I'm not big on conspiracy theories, because a lot of conspiracy theories have too many components to make it true. Whereas the simpler one makes it much easier and therefore much more likely. Now, it's not foolproof, but I think 5% of the time it applies. And also when it comes to speculation, you can't go off into wild fancy and romanticism. You have to have it based in some known fact. It has to be based in known evidence. I always used to tell my students that when it comes to speculating and theorizing on something that happens, you should keep your foot in the 1 foot in the round circle of the evidence, and only stretch out that theory and speculation as far as the other foot will go. and no more. So that's what I've done here. And it's something I think that should be applied much more, in regular life and also the academic world. So how do I think, based on the theories that, the evidence that Lizzie Borden did this, and why? Well, I actually believe that it was a bit of impulse and also planning, but based upon the circumstances of that impulse. So here's the way I think that it went. I think that, okay, when Bridget went outside to clean the windows, I think that in that time period between when Bridget went outside and she came back in the house, the time we know that Mrs. Borden was killed, I believe that there was some sort of conflict between Lizzie and her stepmother. I can base that on the facts that we know that they didn't get along. She'd stopped calling her mother years before. There had been a dispute over money because she talked to Andrew to buying her half-sister a house, which made the girls very angry. He satisfied them by giving them or selling them their grandfather's house for $1 so they could get the rent money off of that, but there were still hard feelings. They never had a mother and daughter bond, and I'm sure there was a lot of contention in that house. Lizzie didn't even take her meals around her stepmother. And in a situation like that, you could see where that type of anger and that type of animosity in that small house could have blown up into an argument or disagreement that could have put Lizzie into a rage. Now, I do believe that Lizzie was planning to kill her parents because she wanted their money. And she disliked her stepmother. She was afraid her stepmother was going to inherit and she'd have to rely on her for money. That's based on the legal facts of the case. That's what would have happened had Andrew died before Abby, which was more likely. And I don't think she was willing to take that chance. However, why do I think she was planning to kill them? Because we know she tried to buy poison the day before and wasn't allowed to get it. Why did she need this poison? The number one way women kill back then and now was through poison. And I don't think that's a coincidence that she tried to order this poison, she couldn't get it, and then the next day there's this axe murder. I do think she was planning to kill her parents, or at least her stepmother, to knock her out of the way. I think the stepmother was the goal. Get her out of the way so that when father did die, she would inherit. That seems to follow the legal evidence. That also seems to follow the laws of inheritance as well as the animosity we know was there between her and mother. What I think happened was that animosity boiled over. I don't know what the argument was. I don't know what caused it, what set it off, but I think there was some sort of argument or some sort of something that words between them that set Lizzie off. We know Lizzie had a very bad temper. She was known as very fiery. I think that she got upset, got mad, and said, to hell with this. Went downstairs, grabbed that iron, which we know was there from the testimony because she had been ironing handkerchiefs. She went back upstairs, walked around that bed. The mother would have saw her, just like I've said in the other videos. She saw her attacker coming. Bill was like, well, if she's coming with a hatchet, wouldn't she be afraid? Not if she was coming with an iron in her hand. She was ironing downstairs. She may have been thinking she was going to iron upstairs. And she come around that bed, and as she turned her back while she was talking to her, she knocked the crap out of her with that iron. And in this rage, she hit her 19 times above the head with that edge cutting into her, but the weight bludgeoning her head in. Now she's killed her mother in a crime of passion. This was impulsive. And then it suddenly hit her. Oh my God, I've killed her. And the next thought that would come to anybody, especially, with her father as the head of the family and the money and the respect, oh my God, my father's going to find out about this. Not only may I hang for this, but my father's going to find out. I'll be disinherited. I'll be disowned. And I think she almost went into a panic. But then I think she had a cool calculation of her father And I think she's like, okay, wait a minute. Nobody saw me do this. Bridget is outside. You know, I could claim that somebody, nobody's going to believe I did this anyway. I'm a woman. You know, nobody's going to think that I killed her. You know, they're going to think that it was a robber. They're going to think that maybe my uncle did it. He is visiting. And then she started she would have known, well, okay, Bridget's not going to come upstairs. She's not allowed upstairs in the bedrooms, which was right in the testimony of Bridget. We know that. So she goes down and she asks, Bridget says, are you going to be back in soon? She don't ask her once. I think that was just common courtesy. The second time, I think she was like, so you going to be outside again a while? Yeah. Oh. So now she goes and she cleans up. She goes and cleans herself up. She changes her clothes. She takes a bath. She has an hour here, so she does that. But now she knows her father's going to be coming home. And she does not want to confront her father. She does not want her father to find out this crime. And the only alternative she has now is to kill him too. And now she inherits. You know, but she did not want to confront her father and know that he does, because he would have known she did this. So my only question here is what I said before. If I could ask Bridget anything, I'd ask Bridget, did you commonly take a nap in the midday? Did you have a siesta? If she said yes, I think it would tie up everything I'm thinking. But when she came in, perhaps Bridget said she was going to go upstairs. That's what she said. Maybe, as they did in the movie with Elizabeth Montgomery, maybe she suggested, you know, you've been working really hard. Why don't you go up and lay down? And, of course, she took that advantage of that. Now, that leaves her alone with her father. So she goes and puts on that coat because she knows her father's going to lay down. This gal's had a routine, like I talked about in the last video. So she waits for her father to go and do his typical lay down. She goes, puts on this heavy coat that was probably put up because it was summer. She gets that iron again. She waits for him to doze off. She goes in that room and she bludgeons him to death with it, crushing in the whole side of his house. Blood spurting everywhere, most of it getting on the coat. Then all she has to do now is go put that, wash the iron off a bit, set it on the stove, and it'll dry completely out in a few seconds. And then clean her face up, wash her hands, take off the coat. She takes it and she stuffs it under her father's head. Now she calls upstairs to the maid. All of this would have been easily done in maybe 10 minutes. So I think that it was both an act of passion, the first one, for a woman she was already planning to kill. She made her mad and she went ahead and killed her. Then that forced her to plan to kill her father out of necessity. And then, of course, the whole thing with the blood, there probably wouldn't have been much blood on her. And the cops was never going to ask her to strip, like I talked to in the last video. But also something that was said by Dr. Bowen in his testimony, they asked, did you ever see blood and what color dress? He said, well, she went upstairs later and changed clothes. Never hear about that, do you? Right after the murder, she went and changed her clothes. Why? Just in case there's some blood on it. Everybody talks about the dress and all this. What they don't talk about is that within an hour or so, if the cops all come in and she got the opportunity, she went and changed clothes. And she's a Victorian woman. Nobody's going to go inspect her, watch her strip, and check her clothes. That's how I think Lizzie Borden did it. She killed in passion, and then she had to compensate and made the decision, penny in for a penny, in for a pound. Now, I'd rather kill my father than him to know that what I did. And that's how I think Lizzie Borden did it. Well, okay, folks. Both me and Raven Key like to thank you for watching this video. I hope you watch the whole series of them, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I welcome any conversation, so long as they're polite. So long as they're respectful on this topic. I've had a good time answering a lot of these questions and topics on Lizzie Borden. And you know what? To heck with saying this is the last one. Let's keep it going. If more stuff comes up, I'll make more videos. Why not? Why limit something that seems to be so rich in material? All right. So, you know what? You know what? Pursue your passions in life. Lizzie Borden's one of mine. So is Jack the Ripper. So is other mysteries. You pursue your passions, and while you do it, just like me and my Raven kitty, you stay pretty. You spoiled girl.